Bonnie and Clyde. Bonnie and Clyde were a notorious criminal couple who operated in the United States during the Great Depression era of the 1930s. Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow gained notoriety for their string of robberies and murders, as well as their ability to elude law enforcement for a long period of time. Bonnie and Clyde met in Texas in 1930, and they quickly fell in love. Bonnie was married at the time, but she left her husband to be with Clyde. They embarked on a life of crime, robbing banks, gas stations, and stores throughout the central United States. Over the course of their criminal spree, Bonnie and Clyde became famous for their daring escapes from law enforcement, their flamboyant personalities, and their willingness to use violence. They were ultimately ambushed and killed by law enforcement officers in May 1934, bringing an end to their crime spree. Bonnie and Clyde's story has been the subject of numerous books, movies, and other media, and they have become a cultural icon of the outlaw lifestyle. Bonnie and Clyde crimes. Bonnie and Clyde were known for a series of robberies and murders they committed throughout the central United States during the 1930s. Some of their most infamous crimes include the killing of 2 police officers in Joplin, Missouri in 1933. Bonnie and Clyde were hiding out in Joplin when they were confronted by law enforcement. A shootout ensued, and 2 police officers were killed. The murder of a store owner in Hillsborough, Texas in 1933. Bonnie and Clyde killed the owner of a store during a robbery. The murder of a police officer in Grapevine, Texas in 1934. During a routine traffic stop, Bonnie and Clyde killed a police officer. The robbery of the Eastham prison farm in Texas in 1934. Bonnie and Clyde and their gang broke into the prison and freed several prisoners. These and other crimes made Bonnie and Clyde 2 of the most wanted criminals in the United States at the time. They became known for their brazen robberies and their ability to elude law enforcement for extended periods of time. However, their criminal spree ultimately came to an end when they were ambushed and killed by law enforcement officers in May 1934. Bonnie and Clyde were in love? Yes, Bonnie and Clyde were in love. They met in Texas in 1930 and quickly fell for each other. Despite their involvement in crime, their love for each other was a central part of their story. They wrote letters to each other when they were apart and often referred to each other as husband and wife, even though they were never legally married. Their relationship has been romanticized in popular culture, with many films and songs depicting them as a tragic couple on the run from the law. Why Bonnie and Clyde were called handsome couple. Bonnie and Clyde were often described as a handsome couple, or good-looking pair, in the media during their crime spree. This was partly due to the fact that they were both young and attractive. Bonnie was 19 years old and Clyde was 21 when they met, and they were both considered to be good-looking by the standards of the time. In addition to their physical appearance, Bonnie and Clyde also had a certain charisma and charm that attracted people to them, despite their criminal activities. They were seen as rebels and outlaws, and many people were fascinated by their story. This led to them being portrayed as glamorous and romantic figures, even as they committed violent crimes. Over time, their reputation as a handsome couple has become a part of their legend, and they remain a cultural icon of the outlaw lifestyle. Bonnie and Clyde modus operandi. Bonnie and Clyde's modus operandi for their criminal activities typically involved armed robbery of banks, stores, and gas stations. They would often scope out potential targets in advance, looking for places that they thought would have a lot of cash on hand. When they arrived at the target location, they would use their weapons to intimidate the employees and customers into handing over money and valuables. They were known for their quick getaway, often leaving the scene of the crime before law enforcement could arrive. Bonnie and Clyde were also willing to use violence when necessary. They were responsible for several murders during their crime spree, including those of police officers and innocent bystanders. Their ability to elude law enforcement for extended periods of time was also a key part of their modus operandi. They would often switch vehicles and hide out in different locations to avoid capture. This made them difficult for law enforcement to track down, and they were able to continue their criminal activities for several years before they were finally caught. How did Bonnie and Clyde get caught? Bonnie and Clyde were ultimately caught as a result of a joint effort between law enforcement agencies. In early 1934, a team of Texas Rangers, led by Captain Frank Hamer, began to track down Bonnie and Clyde. They studied the couple's movements and patterns, looking for opportunities to catch them off guard. On May 23, 1934, Hamer and his team received a tip that Bonnie and Clyde were planning to rob a store in Bienville Parish, Louisiana. They set up an ambush on a rural road, and when Bonnie and Clyde's car approached, they opened fire, killing both of them. The ambush was a controversial event, as some people criticized the law enforcement officers for using excessive force. However, it was seen by many as a necessary action to bring an end to Bonnie and Clyde's violent crime spree. The bodies of Bonnie and Clyde were taken to a funeral home in Dallas, where they were displayed to the public. Thousands of people came to view their bodies, and their story became a sensation in the media. Today, Bonnie and Clyde are remembered as a symbol of the lawless and romanticized outlaw lifestyle of the 1930s. How did Bonnie and Clyde die? Bonnie and Clyde died in a police ambush on May 23, 1934. They were driving in a stolen Ford V8 on a rural road near Sailles, Louisiana when a group of law enforcement officers, led by Texas Ranger Captain Frank Hamer, opened fire on them. The officers had been waiting in ambush for Bonnie and Clyde, who were suspected of planning to rob a store in Bienville Parish, Louisiana. When the couple's car approached, the officers began shooting, riddling the car with bullets. Bonnie and Clyde were both hit by the gunfire and died instantly. They were 23 and 25 years old, respectively, at the time of their deaths. The ambush was controversial at the time, with some people criticizing the law enforcement officers for using excessive force. However, it was seen by many as a necessary action to bring an end to Bonnie and Clyde's violent crime spree.